page 109, because the first page is really just historical inside baseball stuff. It's, where was this written at? What is it? And it doesn't really actually pertain necessarily to the
But you gave it to me just in case.
Because then you have the title and
I do have the title.
Liturgy as Action and so on. Lutheran Theological Seminary, Philadelphia, PA.
109. Liturgy as Action in the 16th century.
In the ancient world. Yeah, that's the one. Brandon Zwingli.
We're going to go right into Reformation because that's who we are.
Well, we'll go Liturgy as Action in the ancient world because it covers Mimesis and then.
Where is that? Is that one?
It's on the left-hand side.
Oh, I see that.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a fantastic scan.
You're welcome. Old school scans. Old school.
All right, I got the email that says we're live.
Scan of a scan.
We've been broadcasting for 47 seconds.
Nice. There we go. Hit the bump.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear it. I don't hear it, so
I don't. That's okay.
No, hold on.
I can count it off in my head.
No.
I've heard it so many times.
Make this work. Okay, let's do that.
Plus, I like this little banter before we start talking to drive people crazy.
Really?
Yeah, it's fun to get those.
Oh,
emails.
yeah, the email.
Just stop talking and get to the point.
Well, they don't. If you don't do the podcast version, the podcast version cuts off like all of that.
Oh, does it?
From the front end? Yeah, we just go right from the music.
Nice.
So all the pre-banter doesn't. That's only for the hardcore listeners who apparently don't understand that that's what's on the internet. Okay, anyway.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Banned Books Podcast, episode number 363. And we are your hosts, Christopher Gillespie.
Jill and Will and Max and Relaxin' in the morning.
And I'm Don Riley. Thank you to 1517 for the opportunity to have this conversation today. If you need any of your 1517 needs met, you can go to 1517.org and you will find articles and videos and audio and sermons and reflections and books and everything that you can imagine available on the website to download and or order.
Especially check out Sam Schultheis's Inklings class.
The new one.
Apostles and Apologists of the Imagination is what it's called.
It's good. Sam's solid as a rock.
He knows
do a lot of Tolkien
He knows
stuff.
That. He knows
a lot of Lewis.
Lewis and Tolkien, the Inklings. That's his guy.
That's his gig. So go check that out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Not related to our show or 1517, but Jonathan Pajot at the Symbolic World is doing a lecture series on Dante, on the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso with Richard Rowland. That actually isn't that expensive considering how many hours.
I haven't looked. How much is it?
It's thank you for
like
asking.
$50 or something?
Something like that. And I think Purgatorio is like 6 hours of lectures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And they're well prepared. I mean, it's
very well prepared. Richard Rowland is a uber nerd when it comes to stuff, which makes him great to listen to.
Purchase course materials. No. How do I purchase the course? The course.
But so rarely do I see that. Well, they also did a lecture series on Beowulf, which is also available on the website, Symbolic World website. And so rarely do I see Christians who are also very well versed in church history, folklore, mythology, symbolism, and so on, dive into those in particular, Beowulf and Dante.
Purgatorio is 190.
There we go.
Yeah. So
it's still way cheaper than a college course.
Yeah. And what do you say about content? What you get for free is probably worth it.
100%. That's right.
Wait a minute. Uh-oh.
There are just some things worth paying for.
You can support our program.
That's right. By paying nothing.
Make us feel like we're worth something, please.
That's right. Throw us a quarter when you see us. But all that being said, yeah, no, I think going forward, what I've thought about, we were talking about this backstage, is that I have so many people nowadays, men in particular, asking me what resources are available for them to get more deeply involved in not only, I don't want to say recovering their faith, but maybe reinvigorating or re-entering that question for them, that they're men of faith. They believe that Jesus is Lord and Savior, but they're disenfranchised from church and they don't know where to start when it comes to reading or what podcasts to listen to or videos. And obviously
we would tell them, go to a Christian congregation. Although we can't just say a Christian congregation. Correct. I think I would like to.
I would say this: they don't have any materials by which to judge the congregation that they enter into, and I think that for myself, then, that is key. I teach this in confirmation every year, throughout the year, how to judge a sermon, how to judge a hymn, how to judge the architecture of a church and the symbolism that you encounter when you walk into a church or lack thereof, and then form a judgment about that congregation based on a certain set of criteria.
Right.
And I think, the bare minimum is, when you enter into a church, is it a part of the one holy and apostolic Catholic Church, big C Catholic? Well, if you don't have any criteria, if you don't have a metric by which to measure that creedal confession, then you could say, well, they have that creed and we confess that in the creed, so therefore it's a good church to enter into. Versus, well, maybe. But there's more to it.
I think more often than not, the judgment that we use for deciding on a church is the same judgment we use for deciding, like, what gym you would go to, or what podcast you listen to. I mean, it's largely a matter of personality. You get along with them. There is going to be still content, but the content seems to be secondary for most people.
I think so.
It's like, I mean, is it effective? Maybe that's the most judgment that you give to the content. Like, does it seem to actually matter, or does it affect me in a positive way?
That's a great point. You and I, we both accept that personality-wise, we're a niche personality. So I'm always astounded at how many people actually download this podcast.
Well, or go to your church. I mean, there's that too.
Definitely that, for sure. That's why even yesterday I was talking with someone that you're not here for me. I serve the altar. And as a consequence, I serve you who have come to the altar to receive the gifts of Christ. And so you don't come for me. Come for the liturgy, come for the hymnody, come for the prayers, come for the sermon, as so long, again, as it's preaching Christ and his gifts for you for the forgiveness of sins. But don't come for me, because I'm going to let you down. Because I'm a sinner. That's the way it works. And so if you like me as a pastor, or you like me as a man, that's just bonus. And vice versa. I was talking with my elder last night about that. We like each other. We enjoy each other's company. That's just bonus, right? But because ultimately, whether he likes me or not, or I like him, I'm not called to like him as a friend. I'm called to serve him as a pastor.
It's not a hostage situation, but it is a divine imposition, I guess.
Yes, there we go. That's a great
God sent you to them, and because of that, they can choose not to listen, of course.
Hopefully a light burden, yes.
Yeah, and hopefully you aren't too much of a burden to them, or they're too much of a burden for you. I mean, that's also true.
Right. And so I think now especially, and I see this more and more, almost like it's accelerating, the more people that I talk to that are searching to, for lack of a better term, reconnect and reestablish relationship with Jesus, that's more than just, I believe in God and now I'm going to go on with my life. But they really want a deep personal relationship with God. And they have all these questions, especially regarding, how do I as a Christian interface with culture? What am I supposed to do about the latest political crisis or the latest social crisis? What do I do about social media, et cetera, right?
Right.
And because there's so much to offer on social media platforms regarding faith in just, particular and in general, it can be obviously overwhelming. I always usually just say, turn it off and only listen to those that you trust to begin with, for sure. And strike up a conversation with myself or others online that you say, this guy gets it, and I want to talk to him more about this and get deeper into it.
I mean, turn it off is a kind of critical listening.
For sure.
I mean, it's basically just like, I'm not going to engage this.
Right.
I think, why is it that it seems like we've been trained up now to be like active, critical, consumers of every kind of media.
Correct.
Right. We're supposed to receive, and some of that's propaganda, probably driven, because that is the means of propaganda. Right. So they want us to pay attention to everything, and they want us to receive it relatively uncritical, but think we're being critical.
Right.
Right.
Well, I've mentioned several times in Bible classes or in my sermons that the ancient Druids had this approach to understanding the world. They said, if you can't discover everything that you need to know about the world in 1 foot of ground in land, then you need to narrow your focus. And obviously they weren't saying just stare at a patch of grass and you'll figure out, life, the universe, and everything. But what they were saying is you need to narrow your focus, not broaden your focus if you want to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I was you noted this with the 10 Commandments about how they can quickly become abstractions, even though they're very concrete.
I think the
honor
words
your
are
mom and
very
dad.
direct.
Don't murder.
Right.
It's pretty straightforward.
Well, I would say the first table, have no other gods. Like, well, yeah. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Right? You can see there's a lot of fudge room in there for people, right? Or misusing God's name, And basically, we use the Catechism, small Catechism.
Right.
And then I think Luther gets it just right. He's like, here's the obvious concrete expression of this commandment for you.
Right.
In case you didn't get it both positive and negative sense, right?
But you don't need the Catechism.
I don't think so.
Just read John's Gospel. John's Gospel, chapter 5, for example. I sent you that one paragraph.
Yeah, you did.
There's the whole Bible. Jesus sums up the entire Bible in about a paragraph. But, and for us as Lutherans, then, the whole reason that we inculcate and are enthusiastic about the Catechism in particular is because when I read John's Gospel and then I say, hey, Luther writes this, that's a good
You can't help when you're preaching on a text and you're like, oh yeah, that's what we say in the Catechism.
Right. Which, again, this is the criteria is I don't care what catechism I'm reading, whether it's the Roman Catholic or Geneva or Lutheran or whatever. When I'm reading the Catechism, I should immediately go, Scripture. This is from Scripture. Now the question is just, is that directly from Scripture, or are you interpreting that in a particular direction that I would say scripturally that's not actually what this is about?
Yeah. I think that what do you say, like 1 foot square of land or whatever?
Yeah, 1 square foot of earth, 1 square foot of land, like narrow your focus.
It's striking because we were reading Jeremiah 29 this morning, and Jeremiah instructs the exiles. So he's writing from Israel or Judah back to Babylon, and he says, guys, just do the things that God gave you to do. That's effectively what he says. He says, build houses, raise your family, have children, work hard, be with peace with Nebuchadnezzar. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's such a simple life, and shouldn't they be more politically active to overthrow, or shouldn't they be more engaged in the popular culture of Babylon? And he's like, no. You've got to. I mean, in a sense, you've got enough to do. Just and remaining faithful.
Nowadays, we call that approach to life right-wing extremism. There's memes about it.
What? Marry and bear children, work hard,
bear children, believe in God, plant a
build
garden,
a home,
plant a garden. Right-wing extremism. Okay. And to the point of the prophet, though, and God's point is this also, they will come and find you because you've chosen to not participate in the life of Babylon.
Well, and their falsehood, really.
Yeah, and their falsehood, in particular, their falsehood. And you're saying it not to your neighbor across the street, hey, Bob, you're not mowing your lawn the right way. And he says, well, this is how Babylonians do this. You're saying to Bob across the street, your entire culture is satanic.
I just like how Daniel opens his windows and does it on his porch so that everybody can see him.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, well, you did kind of push the button there, Daniel, but that's okay.
In Minneapolis, now that they have opened up the certain areas of the city to the praying of with the Muslims, right? Their hours of prayer, they open that up now. So they
can do their broadcasting, right?
Yeah, they broadcast it publicly on the streets with loud megaphones, right? With speakers hooked up to the telephone poles. Yep. And I've said to the Christians who've complained, you can do that. I mean, you'll get fined and stuff because you don't have special privilege, but you can do it. I mean, if you're really that upset by that, then put up your own megaphones and pray. Pray the Psalms out loud. Mm-hmm. Stand in your church parking lot, open the windows to your church, and crank up the volume on your speakers and pray. You can do that.
It's like, it reminds me. It's like dueling stages at a concert festival or something.
Right. It is. Isn't that the worst when you go to a summer festival and you can hear the sound? You can hear the side stage while you're trying to listen to the main stage. You're
exactly. Back in the day, right?
We were talking about this. Yeah, I was talking with Ed Killian about this last night, and you. Yeah, like back in the day. It's like, wait, how many concerts did you go to?
After I hung up on you, somehow YouTube thought I wanted to watch the Tiny Desk concert from Cypress Hill. Have you seen the Tiny Desk one?
It is. It's really good.
It's fantastic.
It really is.
I did not think this would be good.
It's so not their their area, and yet they rip it. They pull it off.
Well, I didn't realize how nerdy he was, the lead guy.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah,
he's a super nerd.
Yeah, be real.
But all the historic stuff and how people wouldn't, nobody would play him on the radio and all that kind of stuff.
Well, because he changed his voice so he didn't sound like all the other rappers out there.
Yeah, I mean, he does. Well, he did sound like a New York, even though they're from West Coast. He sounds like Beastie Boys or something.
That too.
Like that.
Yeah. But everything about them, they just decided we're not going to be like the West Coast rap scene because we won't get noticed. So we'll step out of that genre and we'll mash stuff up and mix things up. You're like, well, it worked. You are who you are. And as I noted, like Cypress Hill, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, I mean, Mobb Deep. There's so many rap groups from the early 90s that caught on with white kids. Like the early 90s was the era of white people discovering rap music.
I don't know. I'm somehow I missed that whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
Just wasn't my thing. But now I'm kind of amused
For me,
by it.
When I heard Tribe Called
We had
Quest
Beastie Boys.
first,
that was it.
Yeah, I mean, that was white rap music. In the 80s, definitely. It was the Beastie Boys. And you're like, oh, there's others?
Right.
No, for me, discovering A Tribe Called Quest was like the first time I heard Dead Kennedys on the bus going to a track meet, where I was just like, whatever this is.
Change your life forever.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm like, whatever this is, I'll take more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Dead Kennedys was a game changer for me.
For me, that was King Crimson, a totally different thing. But
yeah, that's the other side of things. Yes.
totally.
But nonetheless, totally understand. 21st century schizoid. I mean, the first time I heard that.
Yeah.
And then I went to listen to King Crimson. I'm like, I hate everything else about this band, but I love this song. I was very that was my youth when I was very impatient and
yeah, but I found this to be the case. I know this is really tangential. What was that I've been listening to?
That's why we do it.
Some of the later Zeppelin albums that I never got into because they just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
But now that he's done a couple albums with Alison Krauss doing their basically folk singing.
Oh, you mean Robert Plant?
Robert Plant and Alison Krauss doing that. I'm like, oh, now I understand Robert Plant. I know what he's about.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of the band, but I know about him. It's like, he just wanted to he wanted to do American folk music. That's all he wanted.
So Jimi Hendrix got completely taken over by his heroin addiction. And so John Paul Jones, he wouldn't even show up for sessions.
Not Jimi Hendrix, you mean
Jimmy Page, sorry. Jimmy Page. So right. Jimmy Page is missing in action most of the time because of his heroin addiction. So John Paul Jones took over production and engineering and composition and played.
Which is good because he's a fantastic musician.
He is, but you notice the turn when you get into presence and into the outdoor and so on. It's like
it's still there, but it's not quite the same.
You can tell they're fading. You can hear it, right?
Yeah.
The hunger's gone. The again, Jimmy's.
Well, I tried the 80s, 90s solo stuff from Robert Plant. Yeah. And I think he was just kind of flailing about trying to find.
Well, you know about his car accident, right?
No.
Yeah, he got in a bad car accident with his family, and it crushed his collarbone.
Oh no!
And that's why his voice changed. That's why he sang the way he did in the '80s, because he couldn't sing that way anymore. It took him a long time to heal.
Oh wow!
Yeah. They were in Morocco, and he got in a car accident, and it messed him up real bad.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yep.
Because I did Page and Plant. There was that solo thing. Well, it wasn't exactly solo, a duo. What was the thing with the White Snake guy? I can't remember what that was called.
Oh yeah, that was David Coverdale and David Cover version, as they used to call him. Yeah, that was Jimmy Page and David Coverdale. That was basically a Led Zeppelin album, but it was a cover band doing it essentially.
Yeah, like 15, 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where would they be today? Yeah.
But go listen to them Crooked Vultures album with John Paul Jones, Josh Homme, and Dave Grohl. Them Crooked Vultures. That's it. I mean, that's like raw organic rock. That's what it is. And that's essentially what, if Led Zeppelin were around today, that's where
John Paul Jones would take it. So you're saying there's kind of two directions going at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is why in the 80s they never asked John Paul Jones to participate on any of their projects. And then they were mad at each other for quite a long time, and then
that's okay. Personality conflicts is often what makes great music.
It's a fact.
Or maybe good podcasts. How about that?
Fair.
Oh, look at that.
There we go. Professional.
Nice segue. Well done.
So now that we've driven away the casuals, let's dive into this one. We mentioned this last week when we were reading Oliver Olson's essay, but this is Oliver's shorter article called Liturgy as Action, and action is in quotes. And this is from a theological journal. And it's his response to a commission on worship that was put together. And really, again, what Oliver's responding to is this liturgical turn in the Lutheran Church toward essentially a late medieval Roman Catholic view of liturgy.
I think we talked about this because I kept asking you as we were reading who was it that talked about the fourfold action. And it was a big thing. It was generally rejected in my seminary education anyway, but
here's the next essay we can read that's got the fourfold action in it, the Fraction upon us.
Yeah.
I was going to go with this one first, but then I realized that we talked about action at the end of the podcast last week. So this essay can...
We did, because we talked about if you do the right things, then the thing happens, and that's
correct. Right.
That's not the right view. Right. Yeah.
And he dives into more mimesis, because I think I was wobbly on that last week because my brain was fuzzed out. So this was
originally from Dialogue magazine, March 1st, 1975.
Yeah. Dialogue used to be the Shiznit. It used to be a great journal for
not
these kinds
not amongst our people, but amongst the rest of the
yes, amongst
Lutheran
the rest
world.
of the Lutheran world. They were having conversations with each other.
Meanwhile, we were in our corner doing whatever.
That's right.
Actually, at the 1975, we were arguing about other things.
Yeah, things were blowing up. What's the name of that? What is that called? Something of an explosion? What's the name of that book?
Anatomy of an Explosion.
Was it Anatomy of an Explosion?
Yeah, by Kurt Marquardt. Yeah.
There we go, Kurt. So we'll start on page 109 then. Liturgy as action in the ancient world. Uneasy in the face of possible sterility, hunger, chaos, and oblivion, ancient man took action in mimesis, imitation of the gods. So that's pretty much it right there. That sentence sums it up perfectly.
It is. Yeah.
Back in the old days when it didn't take an entire paragraph. But
imitation of the gods, as far as like from mythology or from whatever their religious tradition is.
Yes, they're the same. Right, myth is the truest truth. So myth is the communication of the truest of the highest of all truths. So mimesis would be the imitation of that truth.
Got it. Did we talk about? I can't remember if we talked about this before, but there is no dogma that isn't lived out. I mean, otherwise it's no longer like dogma. It's no longer teaching, or it's just sterile, like he said here.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could be non-liturgical is a non sequitur. It's not possible.
It's not possible. Exactly.
And the way that you liturgize, the way your life is liturgized, is going to indicate what you believe.
Correct.
Or where you put your love and trust, or whatever language you want to use.
Your priorities will tell other people, this is the highest truth in my life. Go into someone's house and look at what's hanging on their walls, and that will tell you the highest truth of their life.
And it's inescapable. But I don't think, at least in my experience, people are very attuned to it. They don't really. They don't think of their life as worship. Maybe that's the right way to put it.
No.
I mean, even like I was saying before, go and build houses, marry and have children and work and be at peace with your neighbor. I mean, that is a form of worship.
No, 100%.
Because you're putting your confidence that the Lord's going to take care of you.
Correct.
That you don't have to be like politically active or whatever, or you don't have to do all this rebellious thing. Well, actually, that ends up being rebellion in a lot of contexts. But it's also liturgical because it requires discipline and an orderly life. There's obviously words that need to be brought to bear, to instruct you in that.
Well, and we've talked about this before, but it's worth, since you brought it up. Discipline is a habitus. It's a habit. And this is what the word piety really means.
Yeah.
It means habit. I posted this morning, and it's, we bring the church into our home so that when we go into church, we feel at home. If we feel foreign to the church and it's not like our home, we won't feel like we belong there.
That's beautiful.
And in the early church,
exactly right.
Many of the early church fathers stated that to Christians, the God's house must be better cared for than your own home. And I think there's something,
because you won't care for your home if you don't care for God's house.
Yes, exactly. Because God's house is God's house. So how can you say you care about your home if you don't first care about God's house, which is where you actually do belong? Your house is a hostel. It's not actually a permanent residence. God's house.
I think this is connected to what we were saying, I think, before we went live, and that I was reading about how Christ and creation are inseparable. But we treat Christ in the church is separated from the world as well. And you're like, well, wait a minute. If he's the word that made all things,
right?
Who obviously call, gathers, and enlightens and sanctifies the church on earth, but also causes the sun to shine and the rain to fall, and all of this, it's like, well, how are you supposed to separate Jesus from your daily life, and keep him in that box across, that you go to once a week? That's not even possible,
right?
Without rejecting him entirely, I suppose. But even then, he's not.
Well, it's an odd thing. This is a refuge. It's a hostel. It's a fortress in enemy territory. It's an embassy in enemy territory we've talked about in the past. But you're not allowed to stay inside the walls of the embassy all the time. You have to actually go back out and interact with the culture outside the walls of this place. But yet, simultaneously, you're supposed to recognize that everyone on the street is a potential enemy to Jesus and the gospel, and therefore you as a child of God. It's a difficult paradox for most people to wrap their head around because we don't have that tradition anymore in the church.
Well, but my point is if Christ is all and in all and through all, but you're saying we're in hostile territory. Why is it hostile, right?
Because the devil is the authority of this world.
Right, under Christ's authority.
Whom he's used to subject this world to futility until the time of his coming.
In the same way that he used Pharaoh or Nebuchadnezzar or, go down the list. Right.
Well, even after Babel, a certain number of fallen angels, wicked angels, were allowed to remain to test us, it says. To test humanity.
And we've talked about this, but the hostile forces are also for the sake of repentance.
Always, right? They're not just there. It's not... We're not subjected to futility because we're Christians. The creation is subjected to futility because of sin.
Trust not in princes. Well, that's not an easy thing to do when the princes are very benevolent.
Correct.
But when they're hostile to you, and especially to your faith and to your life, your way of life, it becomes a lot easier to actually believe what the psalmist says. Right?
I think this is why in the present tense passivity and indifference has been masked as loving your neighbor and just preach the gospel. It's essentially saying we're not going to speak out against the demonic in culture, and we're not going to publicize that because we don't want to create conflict. Versus, but you have to call it out, otherwise you get assimilated into it. That's the temptation.
But the conflict, it's akin to the conflict of law and gospel.
Correct.
So without that conflict,
Also, love your neighbor is the law. It's not gospel.
Yes. It doesn't even change the world. That's the other problem.
It doesn't.
They'll actually hate you for it.
The kinder you are and the more merciful you are, the more people will despise you.
It's because you're so pitiful.
Because now you're a mirror of the law. You're a mirror.
Yeah.
And they're going, well, why would you do this? Yeah.
Oh, but what about pay it forward? That was a great, what was that? Fad, I guess we'll call it.
This is what's wild. We're watching Preacher again because now it's on Netflix and Annie hasn't watched it yet. And if you're sensitive, I highly recommend you never even check it out because it's based on a series of comics.
Oh, you're talking about the FX series?
Garth Ennis.
I enjoyed it a lot. It's so sacrilegious. But
it's super sacrilegious. But there is one thing in the first season that is startling is that there's a character. He's kind of like a minor antagonist towards the main character. And then towards the end of the season, he turns and actually,
the Irish guy?
No, the bodyguard for the head of the meat and power company.
Yeah.
Jesse. And he actually allows Preacher to hide in his home. And they're like, what's going on? He's like, because he showed me mercy when he could have killed me. And it changed my life. It changed my whole belief about everything.
I don't know who created that show, but there's some
Seth
subtle... Rogen. Oh, that's right.
He was one of the producers.
There's some subtle... criticism, not subtle criticism of the church, but...
No, that's pretty obvious, yeah.
No, but there's some subtle clues in there that are helpful as to, how the pagan world sees the faith, right?
Well, again, the head of the meat and power company says it. There's only one God, the God of meat. And I'm like, when I said to Annie, I'm like, no, you don't understand.
That's Epicurean right there.
Flesh and Power. That's the name of the company is Flesh and Power. It's called Meat and Power, but it's really Flesh and Power is our God.
Right.
I'm like, it's so on the nose. And everybody in the town is dependent upon that for the town to actually be, relevant. And then, of course, at the end when it blows up, and it blows up the town because Flesh and Power turn out to not be their God. And all it took was one guy not adjusting the pressure valves and it all blows. So there's a lot of subversive stuff in that show.
I don't know if it gets better, but anyway.
Yes, it does. It gets better in the sense of being wild and absurdly dark. So yeah, it's a hoot if you're into really dark humor and you don't mind.
There is some redemption arcs in it, which is unlike a lot of the super pessimistic stuff where everybody just dies and it's terrible.
Well, and you have to remember that when Ennis wrote that, Ennis is a product of British Christianity.
Oh.
And so he's looking at British Christianity and going like, this is nonsense. This is garbage. This is all platitudes and cliches. This is, ugh. And so they're not, he's critiquing a church that you and I would look at and go, he's got a point.
So the reason I brought all this up is I was listening to an old Symbolic World, as you do, or as we do. It was from about a month ago, but it was I guess it was a debate with Pierre Boghossian and Pajot.
Yep.
And they get into this right at the beginning because Boghossian thinks of religion entirely as noetic ideas.
Yes.
Abstractions.
Yep.
And Pajot's like, no, actually, it's actions.
Yeah.
So I think it'll intersect with what we're reading here. So I'll link to it.
So Mimesis, Imitation of the Gods. In his arrogance, he supposed that doing his punctual ritual on the earth would project him ex opere operato to the durative realm of the myth. Again, so how do I get into the realm of the truest truth? Well, I have to do what the gods did, and that will raise me up the mountain. And this is to your point.
Or
about
be
Bogosian.
like God, right? In some way.
This is the point, though. So to your point about Bogosian, so conceptually what I'm doing is I'm climbing the cosmic mountain through the reenactment of this ritual, this historic ritual that happened way back in the past when the gods were doing these things. And by reenacting this original ritual in the present tense, again, as he says, punctually, I am going to climb the cosmic mountain, not physically, but conceptually.
Because of the correspondence.
Because of the correspondence, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's the realm of the myth where the gods were performing the paradigmatic original. This is Platonic shadow and light stuff, right?
Definitely.
That's straight up what this is. So what's happening then is that ex opere operato to the durative realm of the myth, where the gods were performing the paradigmatic original of his actions. So how do you know what you're doing is true? Well, I have to repeat what the gods did, and then I'll know it's true.
So or the other way around. They have this like inherent trust that the myth is real because of its, I guess, permanence, right?
Yeah, it's truth.
Or transcendence. It keeps going from generation to generation. So there's truth in it. And so then through the mimicry, you can capture some of or all of what what happened there.
Correct. But here's the thing then. Is
like pushing the stone up the hill is an eternal truth. I mean, this is life.
So this is the trick, though, is what happens is that the pagans are saying this is the highest truth. This is the truest truth. We're participating in it through our mimetic rite. And then the Christian comes along and says it's actually not the highest truth. This is the highest truth. You haven't gone far enough up the mountain. To the real.
It's still down here.
It's a truth, but it's lacking the point.
It's kind of like the gods are in the first heaven, but then there's the heaven of the heavens.
You're drinking decaf coffee, and you don't understand how much better it could be.
Oh, poor Annie. I'm sorry.
And so in the whole operation, which students of comparative religion call the cult drama, very important term, the main point was that there was a correspondence between actions in the ritual and the actions of the cult etiology. And if you would like to look up etiology for our listeners who may be asking, what the heck's an etiology?
I was going to ask you, what the heck is an et? What is that?
But these used to be, back in the 60s and 70s, very important terms that people actually understood and knew. And
I'm sorry. My search was just terrible.
I'm sure it was. Google's like, ATE?
They told me something about animal diseases.
There we go.
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
It's a cult of animal diseases, yeah.
All right, let's see here.
The cult of
Theology. Merriam-Webster. It has nothing. Why?
Really?
Why? Oh, it says it's the British spelling of etiology. Okay. The cause of a disease or abnormal condition. A branch of knowledge concerned with causes. So it could be either. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a branch of knowledge concerned with causes. So the cult has to do with causes and actions. Yes. Ritual.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. All right.
Sacrificial stuff.
Right.
So it would take too much space to trace how the cult drama insinuated itself into the church. The most fateful period was that of Constantine, whose patronage of the church reflected, I think it's reflected. I'm using an old copy from an old mimeograph, so I apologize.
And I'm not going to pay the subscription fee to Dialogue. Okay.
In an ominous second stratum in the liturgy. So under Constantine, not as a result of Constantine, stop blaming him for everything that's wrong. That's an atheistic, modernistic move, and it's just uneducated and dumb. Don't do that. But rather, under the Constantinian reign and during the Constantine era, this cult drama insinuates itself back into the church, or insinuates itself into the church. But what also then happens is there is this second stratum now in the liturgy. That is, there are secondary things, as we talked about with his essay. There's now secondary things in the liturgy
that are there to serve the primary things.
The cult drama. Yeah.
The cult drama.
Yeah. And so again, the etiology of the liturgy. What's the etiology of the liturgy? Well, what does the liturgy cause to happen? Or what did cause the liturgy to happen in the first place? And what are the consequences?
Yeah. And so all the secondary stuff, the secondary stratum is, what do we call that? Accoutrement, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Just the stuff, all the stuff.
The extra stuff. The stuff on the stuff on top of your steak that you just push to the side of the plate so you can eat the steak.
Sometimes I ask for it, but generally not if it's a good cut.
The mint leaf.
Yeah, so, steak sauce. It's the steak sauce.
That's right. Worship gradually acquired the form of a symbolic drama with a complicated system of entrances and exits, processions, etc. And by the way, what he's saying is these secondary matters became primary things. You have to do it this way, or else it's not Christian liturgy.
Because it's powerful. I mean, the repetitive action. Yeah. There's a love. Well, if anything, it's just a level of comfort.
It's right? called drama, baby. Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, we've talked about this. The best shows are not. I mean, to do a story arc show is very difficult.
Right.
The best shows are the sitcom or the what do they call that? The cop dramas or whatever. Where it's or even the monster of the week kind of show.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, there's the characters, there's the things you're familiar with, and then there's something that's tweaked each week. Right. We call this the ordinary and the propers.
Right.
But there's all the other actions too.
The etymology of the word cult too, for people that are wondering, because we've referenced it but not really dialed in. But the word cultus means to care or labor.
Right.
So culture, cultivation, broadly it just means worship.
It's the things we care about.
Yeah, to pay homage to something. So really what a cult drama is, like you said, this is what we care about most, and this is why we're doing it.
Peugeot goes into that in the linked episode as well. Yeah.
And so, there, like you noted too, so I engage in a cult ritual at home when it comes to coffee or getting ready in the morning or chapel, work, all these things.
Or even the gym. The gym's that way.
Gym's the same way, exactly. It's all ritualized, but really we call that cult behavior, not in a pejorative negative sense, but cult in the sense of what you care for is what you enter into as a form of worship, which is why people have said jiu-jitsu is a religion to them, because it is.
That is before you were in jiu-jitsu, it was we were criticizing CrossFit for the same reason.
Right.
Back in the day.
Exactly.
CrossFitters always have to tell you about CrossFit.
That's
or
right.
Whatever it is. Or vegans, or pick your pick your cult.
So worship gradually acquired the form of a symbolic, and by symbolic in this sense, he doesn't mean the overlap of heaven and earth in, say, like the sacraments. It's a real thing. He means symbolic in the sense of, like you said, it's a TV show that is based on a real event. This movie is based on actual events.
It's like the movie 300 that was based on a comic book that was based on a
Lone
movie
Survivor, more modern.
That was based on the Peloponnesian War.
Right. But Lone Survivor or what's another one? 13 Hours, like modern military movies that are based on real stories. Even if the people that were in the actual battles are there on set telling them this is what happened, it's still, we would call it an icon, right? It's an icon of the real thing.
Well, and that's why I think the television show is it became an act of worship. Obviously, we have the screen and we're watching.
Yeah.
But the reason for that is because of the repetition.
Correct.
It's like here are the characters and the context, but what's going to happen this week? It was always what's going to happen.
Remember the 80s. The 80s was all about the commercial and TV show catchphrase. Right? Eat my shorts. Everybody who grew up in the 80s and 90s know what TV show.
Mikey will eat it. Yeah.
Mikey will eat it. He likes everything. And so on. Where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
That was the era of catchphrases. To your
Which
point,
is mimetic action. Yeah.
It's mimetic action, because now when you're driving down the road going, I need to stop for some food, where's the beef is in my head, so I'm going to go to Wendy's instead of McDonald's. Yeah.
You're not even consciously.
No, you're just like, I really like the Wendy's shakes. I'm going to go to Wendy's. It's like, where's the beef? Like, you've got it, man. It's in there. It's stuck.
Now I feel like I need to watch Idiocracy again for like the second time in a week.
Yes. Yeah. You want to laugh, but you kind of groan too. You're like, oh, we did it.
No. It's like reading 1984. It's like, but he saw it as a possibility, not as an actuality.
Right. Well, Kafka intended the trial to be read as a comedy. I'm like, it's not funny anymore, Franz. It's not funny anymore,
Franz. Well, did you actually put it in?
Two on the nose.
You actualize it, through your words.
So when I'm talking about symbolism, or we're talking about symbolism, what we're talking about is the ancient Greek meaning of symbolon, meaning that heaven is covering an earthly thing, a physical, real thing with meaning, with itself. It's trying to teach you a higher truth.
And they're not abstracted from each other. They're
correct.
Actually,
they have to. Well, they're in unity. They're in communion with each other.
Right.
Whereas in modernity, when we say symbolism, we mean something that's not present. It's representation, symbolism, kind of are used, I think, interchangeably sometimes.
Yep.
So the entrance, the exit, the procession, what we're symbolically doing is we're actually mimicking, mimesis, mimicking what's happening in heaven.
Rather than participating in it.
Correct. Right. And so as a corollary to this, the church building itself, where the drama was performed, was overgrown with complicated symbolism. Right. What do you do when you enter in? You have to make the sign of the cross. You have to genuflect. Well, what do you have to do here? You have to lay down on your face. And then you have to do this 3 times. And what do you do here? Well, you have to dip your finger in the water and you have to cross yourself. And what do you do here? Why are we doing all this? Because that's what they're doing in heaven.
Well, I mean, even if you want to go to a really basic and easy to prove one, you know, the smoke filled the temple.
Yeah.
You know, or filled the heavenly dwelling. So then smoke needs to fill our sanctuary when we're participating with angels and archangels. Right.
Yeah. Or else.
Right. Yeah.
So, and of course, like we've said, these are neither commanded nor forbidden by God in Scripture. So even, and again, they're secondary matters, but that doesn't mean they're not important. What it means is they're not primary, meaning they're not necessary to salvation.
And I think we've established, you know, from reading Olson and talking about the formula, Article 10 and whatever, is that just because they're secondary doesn't mean they're also not powerful.
Correct.
You know, and they can be quite influential in the wrong direction.
Right.
Right. We're leading you away from the intended focus into some other kind of worship, you know? Well,
when someone asks me, for example, to commune them, just kind of in the moment, right? Can you come, or can I come to the church and receive the sacrament?
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely. We don't go through the entire liturgy. We pray the Lord's Prayer, and then I say the words of institution, and then I commune them.
Not valid. Okay. Sorry.
It's exactly right. It's like if we just shave it all down to its bare parts, you've been absolved.
You didn't sing the Gloria?
No.
Not valid.
I know, exactly. See what I'm saying? This is how we get into this trap.
Yeah. It needs to be a valid mass. Got to make it a valid mass.
That's right. So the high point of the drama was the offertory procession, which Donovan got rid of in 2020. It's now outside. The dead Jesus being brought to
burial.
The middle. Yeah.
No, to burial.
To burial, exactly. And the action of epiclesis, that is his resurrection, the calling down of the Holy Spirit into the water, into the elements, into the offertory. It's all there, man. You got to do it that way. The application of the cult drama to the second stratum also resulted in a new understanding of the church year. Holy days naturally acquired the meaning which they had in the minds of those for whom they were introduced. That is, a mysteriological meaning. I love the saints now. I love it. I love feast days. I love them so much. I can't get enough because they all have fantastic stories.
Yeah.
They're awesome stories.
Yeah.
They're like comic books for Christians. You're like, I'm pretty sure that she didn't do this, but it's a dang good story, and I'm going to definitely use it as a sermon illustration.
And you have to be careful what resources you use because a lot of them have been sanitized.
Yes.
And you're like, maybe made more realistic would be a fairer judgment, but why?
Less mythological.
Yeah, but why?
Yeah, exactly.
And what was it? I was reading Jesus this morning, as you do sometimes, and Mark 7, he's like, whatever you pray, believing that you'll receive it, you will.
Right.
And then I'm like, actually, I don't think we believe that.
No, we don't. No.
But if you read the saints, they're like, no, they actually believe like they could cast out demons, that they could heal the sick, that they could, some of them do anyway.
They believe taking the sacrament every day actually healed you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Silly. So superstitious. But no, I just find it fascinating.
More modern.
Because every group, every area has their saints. You have the Eastern Syrian fathers, they have their saints. You have the Egyptian monastics, they had saints. The Gaels, they had their saints, right on and on. And it's fascinating because what you see is these saints are replacements for demigods and pagan heroes. They're taking the place, like St. Bridget. She's this Gaelic saint, but everyone's pretty sure she wasn't a Christian before the Christians got there. Because Bridget was around in Gaelic folklore before the Christians got there. And the Christians are like, nah. Again, it's like the elders, the conversation of the elders, which is this ancient Gaelic text where St. Patrick walks around Ireland evangelizing people with 2 giants.
Oh.
It's fantastic. Okay. It's so good. But obviously, not true. But that's not the point. What they're saying is, your old gods and your old mythology and your old beliefs, such as the Nephilim and these giants, we actually have a place for them within our Christian mythos. But just so you understand,
now we just make him play basketball for us.
Correct. But what they were doing is this, and this is what's key. Like Beowulf was written by a Christian. What Christian evangelists did is they went, we're going to take your stories captive to Christ to explain to you this is the highest truth. And you're focusing on lesser truths, lesser things rather than higher things. That's all. And so what we're going to do is, this is the New Testament, Jesus and baptism and the Lord's Supper and so on. And this is the old. And so what the new does is it comes in, this is Gawain cutting off the head of the Green Knight, who represents the green man from pagan myth. Mm-hmm. It's just Christians coming in and saying, we are now taking captive your myths, your truth, and we're going to basically polish it up and say, this isn't actually the truth. This is the truth. Jesus.
Now this is different than what especially like the Jesuit missionaries
so
did.
So different. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that needs to be distinguished, because they don't take the pagan myth captive. They just try to shoehorn Jesus into it.
Right. That's one side of the, one ditch is, we'll just put Jesus up there with the
or Mary or whoever,
the chicken.
Right.
Or the other side, which is they come in and go, if you don't stop believing in all this right now, we're going to persecute you. Right, we're going to start killing people until you guys convert. Rather than saying like, no, we're not going to deny that you believe these things, and we're not going to deny that they're a part of your culture and your traditions. But what we are going to do is then tell stories, evangelize you in such a way to say, here's the higher truth.
Yeah, and you could see this maybe in like a practical practice of polygamy, which monogamy is not necessarily the normal practice.
Right,
historically. It is given to us in the scriptures, but can you like, would you have them all just like separate from all of their wives or something from day one? And
well, I've told that story several times of sleeping on a cliff that they used to throw Jesuits off of in Mexico. And that was one of the reasons was you have to give up polygamy. It's a satanic practice, and you can only
did they do
wife.
that? Oh, wow.
Yeah, they went in and said, this is pagan, this is satanic, and they went, we got this great view of the ocean we'd like to show you. And so, if you just go diving off that cliff, there's bones, lots of bones of Jesuit missionaries.
We should do the same thing to those people that are encouraging children to come across the border without their parents.
Oh.
Throw those people off a cliff too.
That's not a bad idea.
Separating their families.
Over 250,000 last year.
I don't even
that they know that are documented. That are even documented.
That's still just a
crazy number.
It's not even the real number.
No, it's not. That's what's crazy. Again, to be fair, most of those children are trafficked to work. Not for sex, but for work. So if you drive past a field of people working, you see kids working in the field, they don't have parents. That's their life now. That's what they do. They get driven around on a bus to different fields and they pick. That's what they do.
Have you seen any? I haven't seen any here. You have? Okay.
If you drive in southern Minnesota, they're everywhere.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a mysteriological meaning. We gotta get into the mysteries. And again, this is the point that Oliver's driving at, is that the mystery is a Gnostic mystery. It's a gnosis. It's not like you and I talk about mystery, which is that heaven is revealed through the bread and wine, for example.
Yeah.
Or heaven is revealed through prayer or through God's word, to say, well, there's seraphim and cherubim overshadowing your altar when you worship.
Or Christ in the church is likened to marriage, or is marriage.
Right. Is really physically present, and this is how he chooses to do it. Instead, when he says mysteriological, he means literally, again, we're going to conceptually climb up the cosmic mountain and enter into the temple of the gods. So again, were you there when they crucified my Lord? Is this. It's a summary of this teaching. Like, we're going to conceptually go back to Calvary, and we're conceptually back there. And by singing this hymn, we're participating in what happened back then. But it's not real. This is why Luther just shat on that and said, if you want the benefits of Calvary, just go to the sacrament. And you get it.
Yeah, and this bugs people, because we'll say something like, every Sunday is the day of the resurrection. Yes. Just quoting the apostles. Mm-hmm. Right? And people are like, well, but no, not every Sunday is Easter. You're like, well, no, actually every Sunday is Easter. You're like, but then what, now you've made Easter not so special. You're like, okay, fine, we'll have some extra music or something.
Mm-hmm.
But,
or we'll I say that to my kids every time I see them.
You're not special today?
No, or you're not special because I see you all the time. Like, go away, you're not special.
Today is not a special day.
You know what they really mean, though? They mean it's not entertaining.
No, right.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have this kind of cultic representation. There you go.
There it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
So they acquired the significance of commemoration. There it is, to your point, as a cultic reenactment of the central actions in a given event, as a communion in this event, as a reception of its meaning, its power, its special efficacy. This is the Mysteriological concept of a holy day. What Oliver is pointing out, unfortunately, and I'll just say it to pull the Band-Aid off, is that most Christians are pagan when it comes to matters of worship.
Yeah. Well, think about how many people push back on Luther's explanation in the to the Third Commandment, right?
Yeah.
When he doesn't even reference the day of the resurrection. He doesn't reference Sunday at all. Right? He says,
my favorite thing that I've watched in months, I watched this morning, it was a Catholic explaining how Dr. Luther changed the liturgy, the sacrament, or the mass sacrifice.
Okay.
He would sit and he would discourse with Satan.
Ooh.
And then Satan would tell him how to change worship to lead people away from God.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Where are your, you don't have any proof text. You have nothing. You're just inventing this stuff.
So you create a mythological.
Yeah. Right. Anybody who's Lutheran is following the teachings of Satan. That's what he said. I'm like, well, good for you. Good for you.
Right. Well, and then, I mean,
he's not the first, by the way.
No. You can watch Monty Python. We haven't, we don't really, like we don't have days of obligation, which Rome does. So that would be an example of this, these holy days of obligation where you're obligated to participate in the thing, right? We have days of obligation, but they're basically whatever grandma says, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a little different cultic, and you're not. It's not quite as mysteriological. But
what's the difference though between grandma or the church lady saying it and the Delphi oracles?
I don't know
exactly.
By the way, I guess
this is extremely controversial, and I'm really going to get in trouble for this one. But this is why we don't ordain women. Historically, traditionally,
because
we're differentiating ourselves from the pagans who go to women oracles. They're primarily female oracles.
Yeah,
and the fertility cultists, in particular.
Well,
which,
and
if you read the Old Testament,
it has to have
with it.
It has to have this. I don't know if this is a feminine thing, but I think it is. It has to be saturated with meaning.
Yeah.
Or action and meaning and ritual and dressed up nice and all of the, it's the exterior and less of the interior maybe. I don't know. That's interesting.
Let's see. Who is it? Bo Geertz talks about this actually when he wrote against female ordination in Sweden back in the day.
Really? Okay.
He's the one he wrote an essay about this, tracking it. I should hit up our friend Broer about that.
It might be in the volume over there. Anyway.
But the differentiation then between Christian worship and other worship is it's supposed to be stark. It's supposed to be very clear. Like, no, this is not like the cult of Aphrodite or anything. Like, you can go buy go to Ephesus and buy your figurines and then go up to the temple and worship her, but we're nothing like that.
Well, is it possible to not be cultic though?
No, it's not possible to not be cultic, but it is possible to not engage in mimetic behavior. That
as far mimicry of the
action of the gods, imitating the gods in order to get. So we need to reenact the death and resurrection of Jesus so that the Father will pay attention to us and give us what we're praying for. That's a sacrifice. That's sacrificial theology.
Right. And that's that thing with the offertory. And by offertory, he didn't mean bringing forward offering plates. It meant bringing bread and wine forward to put.
Although I'm completely against that too. So.
Yeah. And I've seen it done in practice and it didn't really bother me too much. But again, it was performative.
Yeah.
They
bring forward, they elevate them in front of the altar. I used to do it because that's what I was taught to do.
It's in our books. Yeah. Right. Face the altar, lift it up.
Yep.
That's what it actually says.
We offer back to you what you have first given to us. I'm like, wait, what? No.
It doesn't say that.
It used to. It used
to.
Did
it?
Yes,
LBW
it did.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, we offer up to you what you have first given to us, our time, our talents.
Oh, gosh.
Signs of your gracious love. See, you know it. Yes, you do. You grew up with it.
I remember this.
Yes, that is mimetic action. And And the first time I heard that,
how
I
is
asked,
that
why does
different than
God
the
need my
sacrifice
money?
of the Mass?
Yeah,
right?
why does God need my money back when he gave it to me? Why does he need my time and talent back when he gave me my time and talent to serve my neighbor?
Well, it's just not a very effective business model. Okay.
That too. But no, that in and of itself was a reintroduction essentially of the sacrificial language of the old Mass back into Lutheran worship. One of the areas.
Go and serve the Lord. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Although the Western Church never succumbed to the Mysteriological concept as totally as did the Eastern Church, true, still the same notion of the cult drama became a dominant theme also in the Western orders. If you want to study more about this, by the way, as a side note, his footnotes nail it. So you have Gregory Dix, The Shape of Liturgy, highly influential.
That's the one I've been trying to remember.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Adolf Franz, the Mass in Middle German. That was and Alexander Schmemann, huge influence on
more from the Eastern side. Yeah, the Antiochian Eastern side.
But Schmemann and Dix in particular, those two. If you really want to,
we read both of them. We read both of them. The liturgy guys all had you read those. Even when I went to seminary, yes.
Well, isn't that special?
You know, we were supposed to read them critically.
Right.
Ish.
Yes.
Ish.
Right. And again, 1984 wasn't meant to be a manual.
Well, and you can't argue with Dix on the fourfold action. It's like, yes, it does have a fourfold action. That's fine.
It does, yes.
But that's not the point.
No, it's not. Just because it is doesn't mean that we should.
Look, it was there at the 5,000 and the 4,000 and at the institution, and now it is in our worship. So, see, it's actually the action that makes it. And what?
There you go. Exactly.
Nice.
Danger. So then liturgy as action in the 16th century, jumping forward a couple years. A favorite theme of those who have adopted the theological program of action is to imply that the theology of the word is somehow outmoded. And here's the key. But Pastor Riley and Pastor Gillespie, why are you so against this liturgical action stuff? Because here we come.
It's substitutionary.
It's substitutionary, and it assumes that the word of God is not enough.
Has to be coupled with action.
And that the theology of action is quite modern.
The hip thing.
For those with a 16th century mindset, says Eugene Brand, another very famous and influential theologian on this topic, such ecumenical consensus inevitably seems like selling out. It is possible, however, to affirm a confessional stand taken in the Reformation, while recognizing that alternatives may change in the light of greater knowledge. There it is, gnosis. But we just know more than they did, so we can change things.
Well, I mean, there are some things that
this
we know more.
This is the Jesus seminar in a nutshell. What's that?
I know, not that way though. I was thinking, like, we didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls at the time of the Reformation.
Yeah,
but the Dead Sea Scrolls don't actually tell us less than what we already knew.
No,
they affirm what we knew.
Right.
Now we have document, because, like, for example, we would have like the Book of Jubilees referenced by church fathers, but we didn't have it. Okay, well, now we have it, and it's like, oh, look, what they were saying was true. Okay, nice.
Yeah. Right.
Now we can read it with some more detail. Or look, they really they engaged in whatever document. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. So it doesn't discourage, but that's sometimes how knowledge goes. It's like, oh, this is the every Holy Week, right? With National Geographic, they we found this secret gospel of somebody or other, and it tells us all these. Look at how the church has edited the Bible. Right. That always fatigues me. It's like,
updated
okay, they
for modern audiences.
Yeah, they updated. Or they got rid of this. I mean, I do think things like Book of Jubilees or whatever was set aside. It was maybe distracting or something like that. The Jewish mysticism stuff, Second Temple literature probably was intentionally destroyed, it seems to me.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Well, right. And then, and so now it's time. And that maybe that's just the Lord's doing, saying now it's not time, but I'll reintroduce it later and you can come back and say, oh, now I understand what you were saying in the temple.
Right.
Right.
But to distinguish too, again, canonical is what is read within the liturgy. Non-canonical is what's not read. Doesn't mean it's not authoritative. It simply means it's not read within the lectionary cycle of the liturgy in the early church. So there are many non-canonical books that were still held up as authoritative, First Enoch, Jubilees, and so on. And like you said, they referenced them as authoritative texts. They just weren't read in the liturgy, and therefore they were let go over time as people focused more and more on canon. Which for us as Lutherans, we never actually said there was a closed canon. We still haven't said that yet.
No, but we do put emphases.
We play nice. Yeah. We play nice with the rest of the church.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, we'll set that over there, right?
Right.
And it's not like we're keeping it secret or something.
No, because that would also be gnosis. We have the secret knowledge. We have the mystery. We have the decoder key.
Oh, you mean the tablets I got from Moroni?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And so, yes, it's very important to then understand, to your point, there is a way that these things are expanded, the truth is expanded, and then there's other ways in which you say, well, we discovered in an ancient manuscript that there was a monastery that actually had female monks, so therefore we can ordain women. It's like, well, how many monasteries did that? Well, just this one. It's like, well, isn't that the exclusion then, not the rule? Well, yeah, but we found precedent. It's like, but what are you arguing for then? Versus the Dead Sea Scrolls, which simply expand upon what was already there and reaffirmed what we already believed and confessed. These are different things. This is again, like we said at the outset, this is why you have to have criteria. There has to be a measure, canon, there has to be a measure. Again, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that are authoritative that are outside the canon. It simply means that we recognize there's primary and there's secondary. That's all.
Yeah.
For those with a 16th century mindset then, says Brand, yeah, that happens. That is to relate dynamically rather than statically to the Reformation. It is possible, back up a second. It is possible, however, to affirm a confessional stand taken in the Reformation while recognizing that alternatives may change in light of greater knowledge. Now, Brand is saying may because he wants to change things.
Yes.
Thus, may change. Yeah, we can do this. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Right, but you can't remain, you can't affirm a confessional stand and change things.
Correct.
Because you're saying the confession is no longer, we understand
it's not as true as it could be.
I see.
Right, it's
so
true,
but
it's not as true as it could be in modern, again, according to modern sensibilities.
So this is the whole argument about Quia and Quatenus.
Correct.
Subscription. Okay.
Correct.
So we just need a spectrum of subscription too.
Yeah. That way,
or in other words, this is inside baseball. We should probably explain to those who aren't Lutheran.
Go for it.
Whether the Lutheran confessions, we call it the Book of Concord. There's however many there are, 7, 8, something like that. Do they confess what the Scripture says or not? That would be the Quia, right? And you can't say Quia because they agree with the Scripture. Or then there are others who say, well, they're historic they're historic documents that confess the truth to the extent that they understood it or they knew it or was appropriate for the time. Correct. I mean, there's lots of different kind of wiggles in there. Right. And now we have new knowledge, right? Correct. Like, oh, look, we can have monogamous same-sex marriage, right? Because they just didn't know that it was possible then.
Yeah, it's a great example, actually, because it
closed-minded
perfectly.
Or whatever.
Yeah, they were just Neanderthals.
16th century Neanderthals, yes.
And his point, Brand's point then is, what we're doing then is we're relating dynamically rather than statically to the Reformation.
Well, it is contextual. I mean, in fairness.
Of course it is. Yeah, for sure.
The Reformation is a very particular historic context. Like, we talked about this with civil rule, right? To try to apply what Luther says in civil rule, carte blanche without...
Right.
No, he had a godly prince, relatively godly prince, at least one that protected the church and preserved it through, physical means.
Yeah.
That's different. He was still hostile to Rome, so that was helpful.
One person, one vote would have sent him into an apoplectic seizure.
Yeah,
everybody gets a vote? No, everybody isn't going to vote. We have a king for that. We don't need... What are you talking about?
Yeah, and the landowners will meet with the prince, and they have a little bit more sway. Yeah. But the princes meet together, and they kind of say what's going on. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very different historic context. Fair enough. So what is said... there is a distinction between what's universal, that is what do the Scriptures say, and then what is, practical. Right. And so some of the accommodations about the papacy would be a good example of that, where they say, you don't understand the papacy correctly. You think the papacy is like this divine institution. It's not. It's by human right. But if you acknowledge that, oh, yeah, fine. Human right, we can work with that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So that's not a dynamic. It's actually just a critical reading, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway.
To say that alternatives may change, however, does not prove that they, in fact, have changed. Dr. Brand himself, as a matter of fact, relates statically to the Reformation in Zurich. This is all for now. Since in the very process of correcting Zwingli, he unwittingly embraces Zwingli's action theology.
Zwingli was definitely into action. Yeah.
He definitely was, yeah. He was an action man.
He was an action man, yeah.
We have been chided We have often chided our brethren of the Anglican heritage for regarding the sacrament as a mere memorial feast. And we meant to say that the Lord's Supper was much more than something to the memory.
Yeah.
We shall not now debate whether that judgment is fair to Zwingli. Still, it must first be recognized that remembrance is no intellectual occurrence and does not awaken the association of the present. This is where mimetic stuff sneaks in, is through that whole, he says, remember me.
Now, and using mimesis, that's a modern term, but it's describing
memberberries.
The criticism of the past.
Yeah.
Okay.
The point is that remember is much too pale an equivalent for anamnesis. Upon the advice of biblical colleagues, Section 1 of the ALC, American Lutheran Church Statement on Communion Practices, uses reactualization as an equivalent. Well, that makes it so much clearer.
We just need a better word. Okay. How about this one?
Yeah. Here, this one's 16 syllables. Does this work for you? The meaning you're making it actual, real in the present tense.
Now we come to receive the reactualization of the Lord's Supper.
So we're going to go back. That's what means, to go back. So we're going to go back and make real what was real, but now we're going to real.
But it's actually real now too.
Through our action.
Yes. Through our action.
Yeah. This is so great as an example. So you have the War of the Rohirrim coming out. It's this anime cartoon based on Lord of the Rings, right? Warner Brothers is trying to dunk on Amazon.
Speaking of member berries, yes.
Yes. So the trailer opens up, and it is member berries. Remember this music? I do remember this music. Remember this scene where they're riding over the hill? I do remember this scene from the movie.
Yeah, remember Peter Jackson?
I do remember Peter. Well, this is nothing like that, but we want you to think it is. So now here's a girl boss. You're like, but she occurs for one sentence in the story, and now you're gonna build an entire movie around.
Somebody watched Drinker's Critique here. Yes. I can tell.
Member. It's like, remember this.
Well, it is interesting that you have two competing, media companies that they both have the rights to the same material.
Right.
That's what's so interesting.
And both dunk on themselves.
I know.
It's remarkable.
Well, you got to expand the female roles. I mean, arguably Peter Jackson did too.
Oh, of course he did. Yes, he did. Let's not lie. He did invent and sandwich and create.
What was her name at the?
There were things. Things were done, but they were done tastefully.
Well, at least to the point where we were willing to give him a pass.
Well, that's a meme, right? Here's every scene where two women interact with each other in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's just blank. That will not be allowed to happen.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So that's what he means, though, is like, it's a member berries. That's what anamnesis is. Remember? And you're like, I do remember. Well, by remembering and then by mimicking it, you're doing it. You're there.
All they have to do is play the music and show the New Zealand landscape, and you're like, oh, I need to watch them all again.
Well, it's like when the orchestra performs and then the movie's on the screen and then the crowd starts shouting death at the screen along with Theoden. And you're like, yeah, we're doing this. We're doing this. We're gonna do this.
So I was listening to some media critique. This is a side note, but I think it's important. It was somebody who was in the Frankfurt school. I can't remember his name now. He was with Adorno and all of that.
Okay.
And but he has all this media critique. Like all the media defines the message or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the power of film, and he thought, he was very critical of motion pictures because of the power of the mob. That you had to go and see it with other people. And so we were wondering, like I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, but by the same token, the reason why film is so terrible today is because we don't go do it communally anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And without the community, the media actually change. It's not the same anymore.
Right.
And same thing with like streaming, like when you don't have to all tune in at the same time. Because you would call your friends and be like, are you watching X-Files, right? And, yeah, X-Files is on. I got to watch X-Files. 8 o'clock on Friday.
It was Horkheimer. It was Horkheimer that said that.
Was it?
Yeah, it was Adorno Horkheimer. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is another one of their guys. It started with an M. I can't remember the guy's name. But they were all making, because, well, obviously, certain friends of theirs later on.
You talking about Marcuse? Herbert Marcuse?
No, it's not a name I knew. It was a new guy.
Okay.
But in any case, a very powerful critique then of the Nazis and the way
of course, because they used the media, impeccably.
They made film a communal act, but they also even put communal activity on film, right? Like what's the famous one from from the Nazis where they have,
Triumph of the Nation?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yep. It's a powerful film, actually. They recognize that this media has, a transformative kind of thing.
Well, this is what's bothering me right now. I see it on social media more and more every week, and it's really bothering me, is how many people now are actually just coming out and blaming the Jews for everything. Like, the Jews are this and the Jews are that. I'm like, where is this coming from?
So social media has taken the place of film as far as communal activity.
Yes, it has. Because I'm like, I don't like, and these are people that I'm like, a Triumph of the Will. I'm sorry. I was sandwiching that one with the early American film about the KKK.
Oh, well, kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
all right.
but Triumph of the Will was the name of the Nazi one.
Right.
Triumph des Willen.
Yeah, but we used it too.
Leni Riefenstahl.
That's the name. That's the friend. This happened here too. We were doing war propaganda the same way.
But it does upset me greatly that out of nowhere now, we're basically people that I know who I thought were logical people, rational people, are saying, well, look, he's Jewish. Look, he's Jewish. Look, it's the Jews. I'm like,
all it took is a couple of famous celebrities, and yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm like, well, Zelensky's Jewish, and this guy's Jewish, and this guy on...
there's different factions of modern Jews, right?
Well, again, this is the thing of like all Africans are black mentality of Hollywood. It's like all Jews are the same. It's like, you do realize they do have, again, denominations, so to speak. They have sects. They have different groups. But I'm like, why all of a sudden are you vilifying an entire group of people? I'm like, you can disagree with Israel and not like Netanyahu or protest what they're doing to Palestine. You can do all that stuff. But why would you then say that this... Again, that's anti-Semitic. That is actually anti-Semitic, being like the Jews. And it's like, ooh, don't do that. To me, that's as dumb as Christian nationalism. It's like you're just basically kind of like letting this noise color everything that you see.
So the guy's name is Walter Benjamin.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You heard this guy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I should say this. So I say, of course, because my systematic professor that I was a TA for wrote a book on the Frankfurt School that I was forced to proofread and put together and do the footnotes for it. And I spent so many months fixing that book.
Suicide by morphine. Well, I could think of worse ways to go.
Yeah, there you go. He went doing what he loved, I guess.
His notable ideas are oratic perception. Yeah. That's an interesting thing. You know about this?
Again, I had to read all this stuff for my professor.
So he's violently opposed to mimesis. Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of art, that art needed to be unique, and that there's you go see the Mona Lisa, but the problem is that you need copies of the Mona Lisa in order for you to even know it exists.
Correct, right.
But the copies are not the thing. You actually have to go see.
Right, exactly. A copy of a copy of a copy. The further down the road you get, the less real it is.
Yeah. So Arendt and Adorno were people that he dealt with. So Hannah Arendt,
that was
right?
I'm glad I learned all that stuff. But again, he also made me read all the Enlightenment theologians. That's what I did the first 4 years I was at seminary, is just read Enlightenment theology, Reformation theology, and do that book on the Frankfurt School with him, help him with that.
We can't read him, though, because he's a German Jew. So
right. Well. That's what I mean. It's such an odd thing that these things just come out of nowhere, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were past that. I thought I'm over here arguing that we're not doing those things anymore, and then you're doing the thing.
How about Lukács? You remember him?
Yeah.
We mentioned it, right? How about Ernst Bloch? Remember him?
Yeah, I used to have his books. Yeah,
I'm seeing all the names that I recognize.
Yeah.
For some reason, how did these people from, obviously Heidegger too, all these people from, I didn't know Heidegger wrote a book criticizing Duns Scotus. That's interesting.
Yeah, I used to own it actually. When I was in Heidegger, because reading Heidegger makes you smart until you realize you don't understand anything he's saying.
Well, I heard an argument yesterday that Heidegger was the end of philosophy, which is probably right.
It's fair. Again, after the war, he repented of everything he did to support the Nazis and became a mystic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So recalling in this, again, be careful that, because the Frankfurt School believed if we just educate the German people about the Nazis, they'll stop supporting the Nazis. And then, of course, they all had to flee or they were killed. And that's why they were disenfranchised and rather sour on a lot of the things that happened.
Well, and largely irresponsible for the prominence of Marxism and
then they came
schools.
over here and taught in our universities and promulgated Marxism in our universities, and now we see the consequences of that.
But this guy's the perfect example. So I mean, not on the show, but I should read it. the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction is kind of the most famous thing. But because he combines idealism, romanticism, Jewish Kabbalism, right, and Neocontinism and Marxism all together in one person.
Well, I think we were talking about this about a week ago, which is important and is germane to this point, and I'll get back into the essay. All the Enlightenment philosophers that renounced God were all in a cult. They were all into occult mysticism.
Including the rocket scientists.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, that's an interesting story right there, man. Yeah, Werner von Braun and...
Have you read his book?
Which one?
His science fiction book about going to Mars?
No.
Oh, yeah. He has a whole thing about going to Mars. Guess what the people called on Mars?
What's that?
They're called the Elons of Mars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I knew that reference. That's a meme, yeah.
That's his book.
Yeah.
Von Braun, yeah.
But no, they were all into the occult. So they renounced God, but they were still into occultic ritual, symbol, again, mimetic action. And it was, to your point, we don't believe in God because we look around and go, oof, this is horrible. How are we going to change this? Well, we have to take action. But they still believed in ghosts and spirits. But
it wasn't really mimetic action. It was because it was absent the myth, right? Or
no,
they
just went to a subsidiary set of myths. Because they were
a humanist
the Church of Satan had not NASA rocket scientists actually basically paying for it. Like Anton LaVey.
Those were his friends?
Yes, they were subsidizing. There's a famous story about one of the guy who invented rocket propulsion for NASA was in the Church of Satan with Anton LaVey. He was bankrolling that whole thing. And he was into Crowley and sex magic. It's a crazy story.
What's to prove there's no angels in space, right?
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. And then, yeah. Anyways, I highly recommend you look that stuff up because it's a fascinating part of U.S. history that we're not taught in school.
I don't know if it's going to help you with your daily life, but
it'll make you laugh, though, because you're just like, really? You're like, yeah, this guy was super smart and a Satanist. And like a diehard. He wasn't flirting with it. He actually believed this stuff.
But Satanism in terms of like whatever the scripture says the opposite.
Well, it's Crowley is know thyself, do what thou wilt.
Yeah, just turn everything upside down.
Right. Really, it was just to get into ritual sex magic. I mean, at the bottom, that's really what it is. It's a bunch of loser nerd academics who want to get with women, and that's how they did it.
Maybe some money on the side, too.
And then they started believing it, and then, it turned into a thing. Lots of your favorite actors from the past were a part of that, too. Recalling in this tradition refers not to our ability to place ourselves back into a near or far past, but the way that a past event is transferred into our present time and becomes contemporary with us and efficacious among us. So, here's the thing, before I read the next sentence.
Yeah.
What you're saying is Jesus isn't present with us now, like he was 2,000 years ago in the upper room. So how do we go back 2,000 years so we can eat with Jesus and his disciples in the upper room, prove that we're not a bunch of Judases, side note, and then receive the benefit of what Jesus did for his disciples on that night? Because he's not present now.
It's through shadow and type.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can only see the shadow of the thing, but if we faith has to come into here at some point, right?
Well, it's your faith that makes it real.
Yeah.
That's the reactualization.
So by believing that the shadow represents the reality, now the shadow is real.
Yeah.
And you can see through the shadow to the real. Okay.
Think about it this way. If every day you're told that you're sick, even though you're not sick, how long until you get sick?
So this is going to be a little bit bigger question, but is it possible, it doesn't matter East or West, is it possible to think about the history of the Christian church without Plato?
No.
It seems like maybe Aristotle too, but in the West, but definitely
that was
Plato.
the war. The war in the church in the Middle Ages was, are you a Platonist or are you an Aristotelian?
Yeah.
Via Moderna, via Negativa. You look at Luther at Heidelberg. His order, the Augustinians, they were Platonic. Well, who does he attack? The Aristotelians.
But they're not treating Plato or Aristotle as like a religious figure, but rather as they're
treating him as a pagan who's in heaven.
Well, there's that. No, like a teacher of reason or a reflector on reality, earthly realities or something like that.
He's a righteous pagan.
So we would say earthly righteous, but
they
righteous.
Wouldn't.
No, they didn't.
No. He's a righteous pagan. He knew God even though he didn't know God.
I know it's been kind of your project to reject Aristotle and Plato, but I don't know. I mean, that's what I've been thinking about.
In the church, in theology.
But is it possible? Like, it's so pervasive through the way that even the way that we approach daily life, the way that we approach government.
No, it's impossible.
Even like in my favorite subject that we don't have to talk about now, but talking about currency, it's highly Platonic, the way that people talk about it. Right. They're like, they pull right out of the Republic and they just say, okay, that's how we're going to, how we're going to think about it. Right. I was like, well, do you have to think about it that way? I was like, I guess not.
Well, what happens is once you start carving away on like one thing that's Platonic, you start carving away at that. And then there's nothing. It's like, what are you going to replace that with? And that's the history of philosophy. Kant said that. The history of philosophy is a footnote to Plato.
That's right.
Everyone after him, whereas Nietzsche's like, Plato and Aristotle are essentially the hot topic of philosophers, which is why they're so popular. Because they're just appealing to the least common denominator, the most base mind.
Well, basic reality,
and according to,
or they would say,
Girard, and Girard in particular, and Jung, Nietzsche is the only philosopher since Plato that offered an alternative to Plato. Which is why I've read so much of Nietzsche. Well,
some would say go to Heidegger after that, but I think, in any case,
it's too abstract.
Then it gets too abstract. That's right.
Das Ein. Yeah. What is being? It's like, what do you mean, what is being? Now we have to go back to Platonic or Aristotelian categories just to explain what the hell you're talking about.
We have to go back to something we can understand.
Right, like the horizon of being. And you're like, what's the horizon of being? Can I get there? Can I see it? And so
just trust me, just keep reading. You'll figure it out.
Right, exactly. And in German, forget about it. Zwingli thinks in the categories of this Platonic Augustinian anthropology.
So maybe that's another way of saying it. Can you get the Platonism out of Augustine?
No. Because he got it from Cicero.
Yeah. I mean, did he reject Neoplatonism? I don't think he did.
No, he embraced it. Because he was a Ciceronian. He took his Neoplatonism from Cicero. He renounced Manichaeism, but he never renounced Cicero. It was the air. It was in the water. You can't. To this day, you can't.
So this is going to make some friends. So
we're doing a great job today of that. So
the classical education revival amongst Lutherans, and that is our tradition. It's fair enough. It was repersonated by Melanchthon. It's entirely Platonic. And
yes.
I mean, this is what they do. They're reading Cicero. Cicero's in the curriculum.
Right.
So by default, are you reading it critically and saying we reject Cicero? You can't reject Cicero and be a classical education person.
Correct. Right. No.
So
I've read Cicero on oratory to be a better preacher.
Yeah, I remember you did that.
Like,
I tried to.
Where else are you going to go to learn that? You have to read books on rhetoric, which are written by philosophers. And any Christian who's writing a book on preaching is copying some rhetorician from the past who was not a Christian.
Yeah, but it's kind of like if you're going to write a novel, you probably should know like Robinson Crusoe or something.
Yeah,
like the foundation of the Western novel, right? English language novel. I mean,
right.
That the form is set basically by the progenitor.
Well, I would say this too. Like in art school, we learned you have to learn the color wheel and you have to learn the form of anatomy before you can decide to take it apart and deconstruct it. You have to be a master of it before you can attack it. Whereas as a student, of course, you want to walk in and you're a student, you're lazy and immature. And so you're like, well, why can't I just paint abstract?
Violate the conventions, all the conventions.
Yeah, I'm going to violate the conventions. Well, yeah, but are you a master of form yet? Well, why do I need to be a master of form when I already know how to violate it? It's like because you don't understand what they're doing.
Well, this is probably why our favorite artists, musical or otherwise, are always bridge figures.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, they're always in transition. So, like, I mean, you can go far back. You could do like Bach, who's like, where does he fall? Is he, or Stravinsky's that way with Romanticism.
Sure.
He plays both sides. He's not really one or the other. There's a mix there, and that's what's so interesting because it's like you're not entirely violating, but you're not going to 12 tone or something where you're like, I have no idea what this is. Or King Crimson, you're like. Thanks for just completely saying we're not going to be a rock band at all anymore.
Right.
But play rock instruments in rock style. Like, it doesn't even make sense.
Come along for the ride. Yeah.
Does not comprehend.
Right.
Right. So, I don't know why I was going into this. Why were we talking about this? Plato?
Because you
can't get out of the Western mind.
Yeah.
The Platonic categories that, I mean, they're...
Well, even thinking hierarchically, that's Aristotle.
Yeah, right.
Light and dark, duality, that's Plato.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd they get it from? Whoever was teaching it before them, and they're the ones who just wrote it down, and we still have it.
And it's pervasive, or even written into our mythology with the black hat and the white hat, or whatever.
It is. And that, well, it's the knowledge of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are we saying it's not true?
It is the highest truth in an earthly sense.
Yeah, I think that's
And then Christ comes along and goes, "Nigh." You haven't gone high enough.
Did you just make him German?
No, I made him Danish.
Even better.
I love that. No is so boring. Nine would be German. Nigh. I like that. Nigh. Nigh. I do it all the time now.
Yeah. Okay.
The older you get, the more affected you should become. I think it's incumbent upon elderly, is you become an elder statesman or an elder stateswoman, pick up some affectations. Pick up a lot of them. Be quirky.
That's just stick, is I think what we call that.
Be mysterious. Make people go, why are you speaking Danish? Do you speak Danish? No, just that one word. But I do speak German.
Why do you mispronounce all the signs on the road?
I have to.
That's just, out of necessity. Yeah.
Luther was well acquainted with the notion that action is the basic point of departure in the sacrament, since both his Romanist and Zwinglian opponents held the position. But he expressly denied the notion that a past event is transferred into our present time and becomes contemporary with us, or that the sacrament is the projection of God's saving act into the present life of the congregation. It's all projection.
Projection.
Quote, Christ has achieved it on the cross, it is true, but he has not distributed or given it on the cross. Well, here's the quote that I referenced earlier. He has not won it in the supper of the sacrament. There he has distributed or given it through the word, as also in the gospel where it is preached.
Also quoted in about a third of Dr. Nagel's sermons.
Right, exactly. That's true. That's a good point.
It's foundational.
Christ has achieved it on the cross. That's true, our salvation. But he has not distributed it or given it on the cross to us in the present tense. He has not won it for us in the supper as if it's a re-sacrifice. There he has distributed or given it through the word, as also in the gospel where it is preached.
So I was thinking about this with this media thing. This is very important, I think, to the scriptures, is that we view the scriptures in a very different way than all other media that are copies of a copy of a copy. In that where the word is preached and taught, where it is spoken or preached, I would say actually is even better. Where it's preached in the ears of hearers, it is as efficacious as the original autograph, as the Paul's disciple Mark listening to Mary, recall,
right,
or Luke listening to Mary, or whatever. It's as if you were there. It's not as if you were there. You are there. I mean, this is very different. It's so hard to talk about. Yeah. Because we think of, like everybody has their copy of the Bible, right, but it's not exactly God's word. It's like
it's a commentary. That's what translations are. They're commentaries.
Oh, it's hence the red letter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, these are the authentic words of Jesus or something like that. And even then you're like, how authentic are they? They seem to have been shifted or something like that, or edited. And then we come along and say, where the word is preached and taught, there Christ is. Yeah. 2 or 3 gathered around his name, in his name and around his word. Right. And it's transmitted to you through this scripture that has been, recorded and translated. Well, and it was even, until Moses, it's oral, right? Yeah. It's orally told. And people, I know, if you stop to think about it, you're like, wait a minute, how can that be efficacious? How can that actually do anything?
Because in the ancient world, spoken words were more trustworthy and true than written words.
Okay, well, but fine. So that's the Old Testament up until
no,
Moses.
That's the ancient world. That's the New Testament too. It was the Christians in the 2nd and 3rd centuries that actually made it popular to read treatises.
Right, but we have Catholic epistles that are meant to be copied and distributed to the churches.
Right.
Written, but then read out loud to the congregations.
Correct. But what I'm saying to your point is, it's the speaking that's the trustworthy thing. The writing is an imitation. The writing was considered an imitation, a copy of what Grandpa said.
But even then, okay, you're going to talk to your people. I agree with you. And you say, by my actual, delivering of this to you orally, which I'm reading, because I don't know it by heart. Right. I'm reading it. It actually is going to do what it says. Christ is going to, his word is not going to return to him void, but it's going to accomplish what he purposes.
Well, I'm not contradicting or disagreeing. What I'm saying is that we don't understand in the present tense because we think that translation is a scientific endeavor. That if I translate this word literally, it's a literal copy of the original text versus the original writing down of these things, whether it be Paul or Jeremiah or Moses, was already considered inferior when they did that. Because the oral speaking was more trustworthy and true in that culture than it is where we reverse that now, where we say, well, that's hearsay. That's gossip. That doesn't count. That's not as trustworthy as the written word. This is why people say, well, have you read the primary text?
Right.
It's like, yeah. But the primary text itself is still a commentary on the thing.
Well, and this is why people are critical of the New Testament in particular. Like, where's the originals?
Yeah.
Maybe the problem is a little bit deeper, is that we don't actually believe that words are powerful, that they can do things, even false words, right?
Well, that's the point of Mimesis and Anamnesis is, as he notes, we don't actually believe the gospel does what we claim it does. It has no power. We give it power.
Itself, through our action.
That's paganism 101. We have to give it the power.
Except I think we do inherently know this because we're talking about propaganda. Like, if we just keep saying we're the party of joy, 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 strength through joy, and you're like, oh, look at you, you're so happy. We don't care what your policies are because you're so happy.
We don't even care where you got that term from.
Right. Like, oh, so words are powerful. You repeat a lie enough times, you start to believe
the truth. Yeah.
Isn't that? Yeah, that's Grandma taught me that. So we believe it in terms of propaganda. We don't believe it in terms of the word. Like, we do, because you and I, we preach basically the same thing week in, week out, trusting that they'll come to believe it.
Yeah, there's a reason people in my congregation are rabid about baptism.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's spiritual, right? I mean, we can say the power behind the word is the Spirit. Right. It's Christ's Spirit. It's his breath.
Well, as Lewis points out in his book on propaganda, there's no such thing as just negative propaganda. There's positive propaganda too. Yeah. What I do on Sunday is positive propaganda. I'm saying unindoctrinate your brain from the propaganda of the world that says Jesus isn't God. The sacraments are just symbols. They don't mean anything. They're not powerful. Church is just a social club. It has nothing to do with God or heaven or salvation. That's propaganda.
I call it indoctrination, unapologetically. That's what it is.
Yeah. Indocao, to put teaching into.
I mean, you can call it catechesis or use some fancy word if you want, but I mean, I do
literally
that too.
You're putting teaching into somebody.
Well, and that's been the point. This is the other thing. All the words that are spoken they're always spiritual. There's always breath behind it. It's just which spirit.
The Bible always refers to us as vessels, and as vessels, we will be filled with one or the other. This is the dumb animal thing from the Psalm. You'll either be like a horse or an ass that's ridden like a dumb animal. So you can either be a vessel for the powers of evil and darkness, or you can be a vessel for the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, maybe that's what that's the failing. Is
what goes in your ears penetrates to your soul.
We think of words, but especially words spoken, as being neutral, and we know that's not true because if somebody says an offensive word to us, we're hurt.
There's a four-letter word that can be a promise, an invitation, a threat, punctuation mark. Right. We all know what that word is. We all use it, even when people that don't want to use it. If you stub your toe, that's the word that comes out of your mouth, right? Why is that? Well, because words have power. Some words are so powerful they have no meaning. They're just used to hurt. And there's others that are just used to love and show kindness.
So that, I mean, to me, that's just the failing of this, like, well, it needs to be put into action because it doesn't actually. Like,
it's already there. The logos is already active.
Like, again, if you say, I hate you, you don't have to actually hit me.
Right. Why do you think the apostle says that our God is living and active? Living and active. Well, if he's living and active and I'm dead and inactive on account of my being dead in the flesh, according to Paul, well, then if he's already living and active in the present tense, those are present tense verbs, then why do I have to do anything?
We don't.
Exactly. Well, that's now the offense. So Luther specifically repudiates the notion that by anamnesis, by remembrance, we can somehow join our action. That's Zwingli's big deal, the remembrance part of it.
Right.
We can somehow join our action. There it is. Well, we're not totally passive. we have to say amen, in the communion service with the action of the cross. Quote, "If now I need the forgiveness of sins, I do not run to the cross, for I will not find it given there, nor must I hold to the suffering of Christ as Dr. Karlstadt trifles, in knowledge or remembrance, my emphasis, for I will not find it there either, but I will find in the sacrament or gospel the word which distributes, presents, offers, and gives to me that forgiveness which was won on the cross." That's volume, what? That's Tappert. That's Luther's Works, Selected Writings.
It's a selected, yeah, I don't know.
It's the little, mine are red?
I don't know
My
if I
4
have
volume
the
set are
Tappert.
red, I think. But anyways, yeah, it's a little selective set of Luther's works. You can find used online.
I will find the original if you want, or where you can get it now.
There you go. So it is then hearing the word, not our action, of anamnesis, of remembering, which is the significant basis of Holy Communion. The Apology of the Augsburg Confession denies the cultic use of anamnesis when it draws a sharp distinction between the one-time action of Christ and the Lord's Supper. Quote, "This stands fast, that there has been only one sacrifice. That is the death of Christ, which is to be applied to others through receiving the body and blood of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of sins and the proclamation of the gospel." That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Full stop. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not go directly to jail. Receive the gift. And that's the bell. We did it.
Oh yeah, that's your hint. It's against the heavenly prophets.
Yeah.
Volume 40, page 213, 214.
Of Luther's works.
Luther's works.
The popularly available.
Right.
Luther's
American
works.
edition.
Highly recommend you read it. It's a fantastic essay. Definitely top 10.
And it's so contemporary, especially with all of our pseudo-mysticalist weird
Yes, and
stuff.
it's going to get more mystical as we go because people are now realizing that the promises of modernity have failed to deliver, and they're going to look for other mystical experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sacrament isn't, and it is mystical. It's not mystical in the sense of absent.
Mysteriological action.
I know. It's not the action that makes it what it is, but it is the word.
Right.
And it delivers what it says.
It's the most countercultural, counterintuitive, counterlogical, counter-earthly thing that you can possibly participate in.
And I think that the key, as we were talking about with like media critique or whatnot, is it's very much pre-modern.
It is.
Because all of this action and mimesis, this is all modern philosophizing to try to explain why we do what we do and what we think.
As Luther said about Zwingli, it's the damned aliosis.
So, Zwingli is Enlightenment, early Enlightenment.
Well, he's the OG. Yeah.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. This is modern Protestantism's understanding of the sacraments.
So apply those notions to
Erasmus
the church.
is the OG of free will and salvation and the denial of original sin. But when it comes to the third rail, the denial of the efficacy of the sacraments, it's Zwingli. For sure. Zwingli and Schwenkfeld.
So which came first?
Erasmus.
The death of God and the heightening of reason, or the effect in the church and what happened in the church.
Because Erasmus came up with Christian philosophy, Christian ethics, as he called it, right? Zwingli thought he was being a faithful Christian by leaving the church and communing at his table in his house with the shades closed. But ultimately, I think it's a zeitgeist thing.
Yeah, it's like in the water.
Yeah. Luther opened the doors, and then everybody just rushed through.
Because it reminds me of our contemporary setting where people are like, well, what happened to the world? And I'm like, they forgot God. They forgot Christ, actually. They denied Christ. And it's like, well, how did that happen? We used to be moral people without Jesus, kind of.
Correct.
I'm like, yeah, but it only takes a generation or 2 or 4 or 10, whatever.
Well, think about it this way, right, is that the late medieval church, like the sacrament of penance, for example, which is really what Luther and the Reformers attack early on, as really they're kind of like, this is the hill we're going to die on. We're going to attack the sacrament of penance because it's really undergirding all the other stuff that holds up the papacy.
Right.
They did that. But in doing so, again, they opened a door that people flooded through that said, well, there's more that we could do here. You're too Catholic, Luther. You haven't gone far enough.
Yeah.
And Karlstadt did that, as we referenced. Schwenkfeld did that. Zwingli did that. Bucer did that. Calvin
I think we can recognize that and lament that, that there is a way that Lutherans are responsible for what happened to Western thought.
Yeah, it's our fault, for sure.
Yeah.
And by our, I mean them.
Because we opened up a possibility, even though that wasn't.
Luther is not a fortune teller, and he doesn't see the future, even though he was right about a couple things regarding the future.
What, the rejection of the Spirit by Germany?
That too,
the German people?
Yeah. The splitting of the church. But also, he couldn't have possibly, because he was convinced in his mind, if you just hear the gospel, you'll convert. Yeah. If you had said to Luther, Zwingli and Erasmus are going to win, he would have been like, how is that even possible? Like, that's
I think he saw enough of it by the last 10 years or so.
Sure.
And it killed him, probably. I mean, it was killing him inside.
Yeah.
To watch that happen.
Sure. Yes.
And teachers going, over.
And again, it hurts, but for a lot of people it hurts. But Luther was wrong about a lot of stuff because he's just a man. It's okay.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, I think it was important to do what was done.
Yeah.
You recognize that sometimes the cost.
He's still the prophet of Germany. He was still raised up by God to do that for whatever reason.
But it did open opportunity for a different direction.
Well, right. It allowed for you and I to be where we're at today.
Mm-hmm.
And having this conversation and arguing against people that would say, well, let's try to retrofit what Luther and the Wittenbergers taught on this topic. And we can say, no.
And it's the always unpopular middle way. Nobody wants to be kind of in the middle.
Well,
because we think of that as lukewarm.
We teach both, but we practice neither.
Right.
And that's what we do. We teach the Mass sacrifice, and we teach the Zwinglian side of things, the memorbaries. And then we say we've taught both, but we practice neither. We've chosen the middle way. Which is why you have Protestant Lutherans and Roman Catholic Lutherans.
Right.
Because the middle way, you get pelted with stones from both ditches. And everybody hates you. Everybody vilifies you for not taking a side.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a great essay. I don't think it's really available to anybody.
No, it is. I linked to it.
It.
You only have to pay $10 to get access for 48 hours.
Well, there you go. You know what to do. You know what to do.
I guess.
Screen cap. So, yeah, you can dive into that deeper. He goes deeper into what we covered right there. He talks about, Peter Brunner, the Vatican II, modern, in the 70s, modern in the 70s, about the liturgical action, and gets deeper into that. So if you're more curious and want to get deeper into it, that's what he covers. Otherwise, like I said, if we want to, I've got a whole other essay about the fourfold action, the Fractio Panis in Heidelberg and Antwerp, which is more to the Magdeburg stuff that we were covering previously. Otherwise, we can move on and read Clement of Alexandria, which you gave me that quote.
Did I send you the link? I didn't know if I linked it.
I don't think so, but
Book 7, Chapter 17.
Different state to preside at a wedding tomorrow and tomorrow. Yeah, tonight I've got the rehearsal and
tonight.
Everything and
Good.
The dinner. And yeah, so.
It's always fun.
Absolutely. I love weddings. I love doing weddings. They're my favorite.
Okay.
I turn into Donald Trump when it
No
comes
sarcasm. Was I supposed to play like this? I guess I was.
There we go. So thanks everybody for listening. I know this is a deeper conversation.
It's heavy stuff.
A little heavy,
it is heavy.
Heavier than some of the other stuff that we've done, but why not? I know that you who are listening are intelligent and thoughtful. That's why you're listening. You're thoughtful. And even if you disagree, at the very least, I hope we got you to think more about your own presuppositions and
if you
prejudices.
didn't know what we were talking about, go do some more reading.
Yeah, go do some more reading. Do it. Be literate.
Mm-hmm.
Go forth and read. So other than that, God bless you, and we'll talk to you again real soon for another episode. Peace.
All right. I'll let you go.
There we go. Yep. Fun times. Got to drive to
Looks like no, they're going to take the probes out later today. She'll go home tomorrow, maybe.
Good.
Yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you, probably tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'll escape the rehearsal dinner before things get too raucous.
As you do.
I'm trying to be a more what's the word, venerable cleric.
Present.
Yes, just curb my tongue so I don't get carried away.
And you're not even drinking.
No, I know. That's why I tell people, I'm like, you think if I'm crazy now, imagine what it'd be like if I did have alcohol in me.
Oh my.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll see you.
Bye.